Thanks, Treaty. Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. Today, Harish and I, we're basically sort of will walk you through a demo of how, of a Workbot scenario that sort of we run into, we see a number of our customers actually have in place. And then we'll go into sort of like, how was it built? We'll look at the recipes and sort of sort of dig deeper. And I think, as always, definitely this is meant to be an interactive session, so feel free to sort of forward your questions, and we'll take it as they come. Just a quick background. So I mean, Treaty talked about Workbot in terms of what can you do with Workbot, right? So this is a little bit more about, so how does this work? How does the user experience Workbot? So the neat thing about Workbot is that it works with sort of your favorite chat platform, right? I mean, we use Slack internally a lot, and so a lot of the use cases that we're going to show is around Slack. But Slack, we also work with Teams, Cisco's Spark platform, and IBM's Workspace as well. Workbot facilitates a typical bot interaction in the sense that a user can actually ask the bot some questions, right? I mean, the user can ask the bot certain commands, and then the bot has implementations for these commands, and those implementations, of course, in the case of Workato, they're just recipes. So when you address a question to the bot, Workbot receives that message, and then it sort of sends it to Workato, the platform, for fulfillment, and then it waits to get a response back, in case this command actually needs a response, and then it sends it back to the user. So the bot can work both in a direct, in direct messaging environment, as in you and the bot one-on-one, but it can also work in a channel, right? So the bot can be just like any other user in the channel, where you send a message, you can sort of address a message to the bot, and then it can sort of respond to it. So just also at a very high level, right? I mean, also Workbot has a sort of a conversational interface layered on top of it. So what does that mean, right? In the sense that in a lot of sort of chat interactions, you can type stuff, right? You can loosely type saying, "Hey bot, do this," and we actually had an interface like that, and what we found was it was pretty hard to sort of really oftentimes get a sense of what the user was really trying to communicate. So then when Slack actually rolled out support for buttons and menus and so on, we actually came up with a conversational interface using those. So what that means is, instead of like just typing stuff and talking to the bot, which you can do, you can also sort of work with it in a structured manner. And all of those interfaces are automatically built for you by Workbot. So it'll be a lot clearer when I actually sort of go to the demo. So and then today, what I wanted to do was, I was going to show you this scenario, and what this scenario is about is, think about a product organization, right? And so they have a product, and then they have a customer success team that is working with their customers, and the customer success team uses Zendesk for managing, creating tickets and sort of interacting with the rest of the company. And if you're like most product companies, you probably are using JIRA for tickets and so on that require some engineering involvement. So that is kind of the setup for this scenario that we have. And then on one side is essentially a customer support rep, a customer success rep that essentially gets is working with the customer, identified an issue, and then creates a ticket in Zendesk, and then based on certain sort of understanding of the customer, it sort of understanding of the issue, they escalate it to engineering. and then there is also sort of a smart layer in between that sort of looks to see if this customer that is having an issue is a high-value customer. A high-value customer could also be someone that has a big pending opportunity and so on. So if that is the case, the escalation manager gets involved and and really fast tracks that ticket to make sure that it goes all the way to completion. So that's sort of the scenario that we're going to look at. Let me know if that makes sense, and I will sort of. I hope everyone's able to see my screen. I mean, you sort of recognize this interface. So this is sort of my Slack. I mean, this is our Slack demo environment, and you can see that Workbot is installed as an app here. So of course, I mean, there's two ways to actually get Workbot. One is you can sort of get yourself an account in Workato. I mean, many of you guys already have accounts, and then you can simply sort of use the Workbot connection, and that essentially would sort of once you create the connection, Workbot will show up in your Slack And the other way to get Workbot is you can go to the Slack App Store and install it, and then it goes through a sequence of steps, and you basically end up having an account as well as some pre-populated commands that come with Workbot.
So is it absolutely necessary that you need to go the second way? I mean, so what is the big difference between the two approaches?
Well, I mean, the sort of, in one approach, you get a set of, I think the Workbot app that we have on Slack has about 10 or 12 apps for which we have built commands and notifications that we see our customer base use often. So when you actually install from the App Store, the Slack App Store, you get all of those commands, and you've got some things to play with. If you go to Workato, then of course we have these recipes lying around, and you can copy them as well. But but it's sort of like more of a platform view of the whole thing. So here, Workbot is already installed, and then I can type in with Workbot. There's a help system here. So let me show you. Like I can also just do. So here you'll also see that I'm doing a one-on-one. I'm doing a DM with Workbot essentially. So when I type in help, it shows that this particular Workbot, can work with JIRA, Mixpanel, and and a set of other apps. So if I actually create more recipes involving more apps, let's say I create those commands, it'll automatically show up here. So I don't have to, it's just sort of dynamic. It'll just show up. And let's see, what can I do with Salesforce, right? So I type in help Salesforce, and it's going to show me what are the things that are possible here. I have the ability to request for an approval. We'll sort of get into that later. It's a little bit of a more, next level topic. But I can also do simple things like show me my opportunities that are in Salesforce. So I just clicked on it. At this point, the message went to Workbot. Workbot sort of interpreted that command, and then the recipe that is behind it went to Salesforce, picked up my opportunity information, and then did a pie chart based on the data that it got back. So again, this is also very, very popular in our with sales, mainly because they can do a lot of these things right from Slack. They don't have to leave Slack, go to their CRM app, and do the same thing over there. And Workato, as sort of you folks know, connects with over 200 different apps, meaning that all of those apps you can communicate with from Slack using Workbot. So now, so we're going to do a scenario that involved support. So I'll go into and see what is available in Zendesk. For now, let's assume that I'm a customer success rep. That's my persona, and then I just got off the phone call with a company, I got off a phone call, and it looks like the company has an issue, and my sense of the issue is that it's a product issue. So I clicked on create ticket. So there's a first step I would do, and then it asks me for the urgency. I mean, it looks like it's an important issue, so I'm going to type 1, and then it's asking me what is the actual issue. So I'm going to say app makes the phone too hot. And it's now asking me for a description, just like in, okay. I think I did something. Let me just actually cancel out of that. And I'll start that again. I think I sort of fat fingered it and hit enter twice. So I'll start with the create ticket again. 1, mobile phone gets too hot, and the description is when I use the app. Now it's asking me for the customer name. I'm going to enter Gene Point. So at this point, it had all the necessary information to go and create the ticket in Zendesk. So it created the ticket in Zendesk, and then it sort of also has a link to it. If I clicked on the link, it is going to take me to that exact ticket in Zendesk. And then it is asking me, should I escalate this to engineering? So based on my interaction with the customer, to me, this definitely seems like an engineering problem, so I am going to say yes. So what it's doing now is, knowing that my organization is set up to use JIRA for engineering tickets, it created a corresponding issue in JIRA based on the information that I had provided Zendesk. So you see that that the JIRA ticket got created, and the issue number is 96.
So
yeah,
what is that? I mean, I see that there is a message in the channel, escalated chat.
Yeah. So what happens is now that I created this ticket in JIRA, and then based on the information, it knows the customer, it knows the severity of the issue. What then Workbot decided to do was that it decided to actually sort of escalate it further, right? In the sense that this company has a channel where senior folks in support and other organizations are part of this channel, and they're looking to see if there are any issues that actually need to be really watched closely. So typically, this is a different persona here, but for the purposes of demo, let's say now I've logged into Slack as a different persona, and I'm the customer success manager. So so this is an important channel that I watch, and I see that there is a ticket that has been created with a customer where we have an opportunity. So we have a pending opportunity worth $120,000, and also that is and then I have a number of deals, not just one. And what we see here is, again, Workbot at work. It basically also went to Salesforce, pulled out the information about the customer, summed up the opportunity value, and presented it here. So now, as the customer success manager, I look at it, and I know that in my last sales discussion, the team discussion, that this was an important opportunity for this month. So I know it is important, and I'm going to essentially go ahead and create a Slack channel where we can sort of begin collaborating with key stakeholders for, around this opportunity and the customer, that's I just clicked on it. So I'm going to say Gene Point. That's maybe not a crisis, a bit overboard, but let's say that's what. So I'm creating a channel. I'm asking to create a channel called Gene Point Crisis, and so I should have done this, and let me. See, what I didn't do here, it's important to notice. Now I'm working in a channel. In a channel, I have to actually, if I want to address a message to someone, I have to use in Slack the @ foobar. So here I have to direct this message to Workbot, so I have to use @Workbot. So that's what I didn't do. So so I'm going to basically do this just to make sure that. Let's say I'll create the channel here again, and Gene point @Workbot. Wow, I've been doing this demo a lot, as you guys can tell. So I'm going to create something else. Let's say enter channel name. Gene point demo escalation. Let's see if this is the lucky one. So now the channel is being created, and it is asking me to pick, who should be in this channel. So this was a mobile app-related issue, so I'm going to select, select mobile, and darn, that didn't work. Okay. Oh, okay. It seems to have recovered. So now it's asking me, who else I should add. I'm going to add the account manager. He certainly wants to be kept in the loop. And that didn't work either.
Has been added, done.
Oh, okay, okay. And then I want to include the product manager for the mobile app as well. Okay, so yeah, I've got some. I think they're already in the channel. So now this is the channel that it has created, and in this channel we have 4 participants. It sort of it included me, and then Workbot, of course, and then Amlan, the product manager, and John, the account manager. So all of them are included. And then just because you're clicking off a new channel, it also, for the purposes of context, it made sure that we are aware that here is the ticket that is in the Zendesk system, and here is the corresponding engineering issue in JIRA, and then it provided those two. And I can collaborate further here. I mean, the purpose of this channel is obviously to sort of work together to get the issue resolved. And then I can say that, hey, this looks like this is done. We are good to go. And this basically is adding this to the JIRA ticket, and then it sort of added that note. Now let's say we fast forward a little bit, and then it's all been resolved. Customer is happy. We can also just come in here, and then you just basically want to wind down. So I can say in JIRA, JIRA close. I want to close this ticket because I know that it is done. It's asking me which ticket do I want to close, and I can just type in the name here. Yeah, I keep doing that. Let's and then it is closing that ticket, and it also very sort of handily closed the Zendesk ticket as well, because I asked it to close JIRA, but since this is done, the Zendesk ticket can be closed as well. And then it is asking me, further cleanup. Do I want to essentially archive this channel as well? I can say yes, and it is archiving this channel, close channel, and we're done. So this is a particularly involved process, and I thought it'd be a good one to talk about because it showcases several capabilities of Workbot. There were notifications involved. There was the ability to sort of interact with Workbot and ask it specific questions, and then Workbot demonstrated that when I'm working with a particular task, it is smart enough to recommend what I may do next. So it offered suggestions, and then it also offered the ability to sort of, once an issue was resolved, how it closed JIRA. When I said to close JIRA, it automatically closed Zendesk. Then it offered to clean up the channel and so on. So you can build pretty compelling workflows in Slack, and all of these, without having to write any code. It's completely powered by Workato recipes. So maybe if there are questions, we'll take questions now. And then,
I think the first one is
there
are a few questions. So the first one, especially when there's escalations happen, if there's a sensitive topic, you don't want it to be a channel to be public. So is there a way to make it private when you're creating a channel?
Oh yes, absolutely, yes. Was that channel not? That channel was not, I guess, public. Yeah, this is a public channel. Yeah. Yeah.
You could make it private.
You could definitely make it private. Yes.
Okay. So next one, it's do Workbot jobs count against the available jobs, that is transactions, right? Because the volume can be overwhelming when these kind of interactions happen. So
yes, yes and yes. Yeah, I mean yes and actually, sorry, I take that back. So yes, the transactions do count towards your account's transaction limit, but initially I thought yes, it may be quite a bit, but then again we're talking about human interactions here, which is going to still be at a much lower velocity than machine to machine, So, I mean, if you have a large organization, yes, I mean, it could add up to a lot. Of course, if you turn on notifications, that could be, that could, and you can have a notification for every lead that comes into the system or every change in customer information. You could have it, and that could, yes, that could add up. But that's one of the neat things about Workbot is you can make sure. I mean, part of it is also there's so much. You don't want too much noise coming into your Slack or your chat environment. With Workbot, you can actually set filters. You can say, I'm only interested in knowing when an opportunity state changes from anything to close to 1. That's an important event, and then you publish that. Or you're only, you may only be interested in seeing support issues for customers in the Northeast region. So all of those filters are very easy to do using Workbot.
Okay, the next one is interesting, like related to the demo use case. Mm-hmm. Can multiple tickets be worked on at the same time in the same channel?
In the same channel, in the sense that the escalation channel that we created,
right?
It can be. It's just that in this case, the recipes are built such a way that with the assumption that you need a special channel for this. I mean, it could be.
But you could give input to, like, instead of a single ticket that you typed in, right, 10019, you could key in multiple tickets to be looked at.
To kick off the process, or
let me see if I can unmute.
So I guess the question is, like, there's a group of related tickets for a customer, and how do you work on them together? Yeah. It can be done. It is just that in your recipe, you have to essentially sort of plan for that logic.
Okay.
For example, if I create a ticket, in the recipe, you could say that I'm going to look up what are the other open tickets for this customer,
right,
and pick all of those up and send it back saying, hey, here are the 6 tickets. I mean, this is the new one, but there are 5 open pending issues.
Okay.
So yes.
Or every time when the thing comes, in here we had the logic of asking the customer for what is a channel. So your logic there might be to fully automate it. In essence, it might be by customer or by issue. So if it's by customer, then it goes to the same channel, and then you're working there.
Hey Matt, hope it answered your question. If you have follow-ups, send us an email and give us more details about the use case, and we can help you out. The next question, is it possible to post Slack commands from a different Workato org to your company's Slack and have your company's Slack bot pick them up? It is elimination of humans.
It is possible because like when we work with Slack, they have invited us to a separate channel that is part of their org.
Right.
And that's how we work. We do a lot of discussions over there, and you would have to invite Workbot to that channel. So from a Slack platform perspective, you can invite the bot to a channel, and that is up to you to invite the bot to the channel. And if you do, the bot is going to be a participant.
Sridhi, I didn't exactly understand. Can you repeat the question?
So, is it possible to post Slack commands from a different Workato org to your company's Slack and have your company's Slack bot pick them up?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. This is fascinating.
It is, but it kind of also is like a really good question because if you're using Slack for customer interactions, it could become there could be a lot going on, and you want the bot to pick up and and identify patterns or things that you have to immediately follow on. Makes a lot of sense.
Right. No, very cool use case. There's one which is from Chase. It's not related to the demo, but it's more around. There's a section for related commands. Can you explain how that works with something like contact ID from Salesforce?
Okay, the related commands, as in configuration for Workbot in the recipe, right?
Yeah. I guess
so I mean, if you if you don't mind, we will get to that, but it may be a little bit involved topic to discuss right now.
Okay.
But we will get to that section when we go to the recipes, which is where we are going next. We're going to jump into the recipes, and we can talk about it at that time.
Okay, hey Raj, you have a question, how do we create the integration and workflow? Is it a recipe? The answer is yes, and we'll cover that. So this was the demo to showcase how Workbot works, and Gautam will open the hood to show what the recipe looks like.
Okay, so let's do that. But we should continue, or there are more questions?
There are, I think we're good, so we can move on.
Okay. So this is an example of a recipe that that posts notifications to Slack, from just conceptually, Workbot is like any other connector. Just like you work with Salesforce, Zendesk, and so on, Workbot is just another connector as well. And it is the same triggers and actions paradigm to work with it. In this particular case, you can see that here, this is the step where it is constructing a message and posting it to Slack. And it posts this message each time there is a new updated deal approval, note in Salesforce. It is a custom object, so anytime that object has a new entry or the entry changes, it posts a notification. And Workbot for Slack is the connector, and in this case, I'm using the notification message, but there are other messages as well. So in terms of the there is a certain structure that Workbot expects. And this structure sometimes feels a little bit tedious, but the purpose of this structure is so that it can do a better job of helping people. So when you type in help, it gives you, it can list out all the commands you've built, all the notifications you've built, and also when people are typing it in without actually using the menus, it tolerates a variety of mistakes and orderings and so on. I mean, not mistakes, but it understands a variety of conversational conversational messages, right? So for that, this structure helps it be much more effective in identifying what the user is saying. So that's a lot of it is for that. And the first thing is the the event name.
So, I mean, since this is a notification, notification has 3-part metadata in the sense, what is the source of the notification? Usually, it's a application, and we have we got list of all the adapters, the applications that we connect to in that dropdown, or you can provide custom values by switching.
You can use the toggle field.
Yeah, toggle field. Yeah. So then you got the business object, and then the actual event, whether you're adding or updating or deleting. So rest of the things are related to the
message itself.
So,
and as you can tell, again, you're composing the message that with data that was aggregated from the previous steps. Much of this information is all coming from Salesforce here, but that is what it is doing. And then each of these, the attachment title, title link, attachment text, these directly map to Slack's language around it in terms of, if you look at the every Slack message, they identify what the title is, what is attachment text, and so on. And each of this directly maps to that. And I can, if you click through and go to this, it basically shows you, this is their message builder to give you a sense of what each part means. And then title link, attachment text, message type. I mean, that is basically the part. It is the color of that vertical bar. And then you can do buttons. I'll show an example that actually does buttons. This one doesn't. But because why are buttons and drop downs a little bit special, right? Because when you click on a button or select a drop-down menu item, that has to be a corresponding action that happens. So and the way in Workato, what you would do is you would say, this is the name of my button, and when this button is pressed, I want it to issue this Workbot command, and that is how that binding is done. So this is, notifications are really quite straightforward. Let me actually pick one that actually does. I think I have one here. Yeah. So this is a little bit. This is a command, right? So the command essentially, the format is the user asks something in Slack, and then that comes directly to Workbot. And then Workbot will execute this recipe each time that happens.
So how does the user pass data to the commands? How does the user? Yeah. Well, there are. Every command has parameters, so you can specify that. In this case, when you are creating a ticket, it's got 4 parameters: urgency, summary, description, and customer. You can actually, when you're typing these commands, you can give all these values in one go. But we made it easy by converting this, the command parameters that you've specified into an interactive user interface. Basically, we can parse all your commands and then ask for it one by one if you don't supply it.
So just to sort of tie it back, right? So let me do help.
Was it maybe you can get the help for the same ticket? Yeah.
So here, when I say create ticket, it asked me a set of questions. This is how we are providing input to the command. And when you define it here I'm basically saying, these are my 4 inputs. Then Workbot would automatically ask these questions in this format.
Yes.
So to ask them, one after the other. Of course, I talked about there is also a command line interface. So I could also type the whole thing in, but what we are seeing is just a majority of Workbot users are preferring this approach where it asks them one by one, so they don't miss anything.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll now go back again. So that's that's the input parameters.
Can I introduce? So there's one question.
Sure.
Which is, how does the input parameter with data type file work? So there's a file data type. How does that work as an input parameter?
How do basically attachments work?
I think
there's a separate command for working with attachments.
I think when it's a file type, we ask them to drop the file into the when we ask for when there is a file type,
right?
So the end user is supposed, he'll be asked to drop the file into the channel. So then you get the file handle in the in the command output, and then you have to use Workbot to read file command to get the content of the.
Okay.
So I was just going to show you that command. So basically, it that's a command that would fetch the URL. Okay, this recipe is live, so I won't go into that. Let me show you what we're talking about here. See here, download attachment. So you would use what Harish said in combination with download attachment. Is there any other question?
No, good so far.
Okay. So so continuing on, so essentially this recipe gets triggered whenever the user types this particular command in Slack, and then in the command we basically define the command to take 4 pieces of input. Workbot will make sure that it sort of iterates through and asks the user to provide all that information. So once that is done, it is going to hit the actions. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I mean, we're talking about parameters, but how does in the channel when I'm when I type a command for the Workbot, how is the request routed to this specific recipe?
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I mean, again, earlier in the notification, we talked about 3 identifying information that we use for identifying a notification or a command. So in this case, you have an application and the actual the action name and the business business data. In this case, what we're saying is Zendesk. We want to create a Zendesk ticket. Now, the whole idea is you could either do this interactively or through the buttons. If you were to do it, if you're typing in, if you're using the console, you could have said, Workbots, create Zendesk ticket, and type all the parameters in one line, and it would create that ticket. So those 3 keywords, they they help us identify which is the command we're supposed to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, since we moved to the buttons, all these things user doesn't have to type it. It's much easy for you to launch the command.
Okay. Okay. And in this particular case, I mean, that is what it is trying to do. It is trying to create a ticket in Zendesk, and these are the set of steps that it is taking before it creates the ticket in Zendesk. And as you can see, it is also looking into Salesforce and using that information when it creates the ticket. One of the things that we see people do quite a bit is, sometimes these things can be involved. I mean, you're working with multiple apps in the back, and you have a person sitting in front of it expecting an immediate response. So you'll notice that it sends messages. It basically sends this message back to the user or channel where the message comes from. This is really just like, hey, I'm doing work, and we find that this actually is, people are doing quite a bit of it. And here, the difference between this one and the previous one that we looked at is here you actually want to respond to the channel from which the message came, and that is information you can get from the data, that's the trigger data, and that is how it is sending it back to exactly the channel that where it came from. And again, some of the meta information in terms of application and so on. And here it is essentially constructing the message itself. And this is a very simple, hey, I'm doing work. So that's why there's not a whole lot of things here. But let's look at, this may actually be a bit more involved. Let's look at this. So this one does have a button, and it is essentially, we were talking about how the way binding works. What I mean by binding is when a user selects a pick list, a value, or clicks on a button, you want to have a handler for that, right? And that handler is not necessarily this recipe. And that handler essentially is defined also as a Workbot command. And the reason that is interesting and also kind of useful is because you could have a set of commands, and then using those commands, you can build out additional higher level, more complex workflows on top of that. So that is what is happening here. It's basically saying, the command to bind to this button is, the Zendesk escalate ticket, and then that particular command takes ticket number, and the value for that is coming from the ticket ID here. This maybe this is getting a bit involved, so maybe if there are questions, I'll take them.
Okay. So there's one question from Chase, which is, can the same command be used to call two recipes?
Can the same command be called?
Used to, or can two recipes respond to the same command?
Yeah, I guess no. You have to.
What would the use case be actually? I'm trying to this. Are you trying to have? Spawn two things in parallel? Is that sort of the reason for this? So that they clicked one button and you want to do two parallel tasks.
So the elaboration is the same command for opportunities, and so, hey Chase, can I unmute you and you can ask the question with more details and we can take that on? Just let me know. And in the meantime, I'll take a separate question.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're demoing it, there's everything starts with this keyword help app name, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people might mistype, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the flexibility around that to, instead of help, somebody say HLEP or HLP, right? So, is that keyword configurable?
The keyword, it is not easily configurable.
Okay.
But it forms like the base system within Workbot. Things on top of it are configurable. Okay. But that is like the, the
help itself is not.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of.
But it's a good suggestion. We might, we might add. Internally we have synonym-based and NLP-based system there, so we can extend it to.
So as you can see, I just typed in HLP, and then it came back and said, hey, I didn't quite get that.
It launches help.
It launches help.
Yeah. Mm. So it has some tolerance to
Interestingly enough, for help, is basically it doesn't matter how you type help; it's going to show up help. So it's already there, I guess.
Okay, so Chase has elaborated the same command for opportunities. Filter one on closed one, for the other for closed last.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm assuming that you would have actually you may have the same recipe and pass it different values for it to behave differently. So that is what we would recommend in that scenario. But if
basically in this case he'll have a parameter there, right? He'll collect the parameter, and then at the recipe level you'll make that call. You know what to do
within that. So it will be one recipe behaving differently based on the input data being passed in.
Right. Okay.
And also, just to throw this out there, if you want to do things in parallel, you could do that too. So this recipe would in turn call other recipes, right? You do call recipe, and you'd call those recipes in async mode.
Right.
So they're sort of asynchronously. The parent recipe will continue execution, while the child recipe can asynchronously do some other work that may take a lot of time.
Okay.
So that's possible too.
All right, Chase, hopefully that answers your question. There are multiple ways to do this. Okay.
Any other questions? Or
so far good.
Okay.
How are we doing on time?
We have 8 more minutes. Okay.
And it's just good hygiene to I mean, these are to have a giant error monitor on these things, just because when you're interacting with the person on the other side, they always want to know what happened, and so it's just good practice to have a giant error monitor and post a message back, so that the user is not left hanging. The other thing that I had no idea we had taken up so much time, but because there's a couple more things that I was hoping to be able to show. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just the one question that Chase had around the contact ID, the Salesforce, the related commands.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's. Thank you for.
It will be not here, right? Business.
Oh, I was in the trigger.
Mm-hmm. The same. This is running, right? So I cannot see the whole thing. I think.
Hey, folks, while we wait for Harish and Gautam to answer that question, can you please take a moment to respond to this poll, like what was most useful for you in this product hour? It's feedback for us to improve the format and content.
Oh, this is also live.
Okay. Okay, related commands. So let's say that we are posting a message on for a Zendesk ticket. Now there are 2 ways you can kind of make recommendations based on those messages. One is by you explicitly attaching buttons and saying that, okay, do you want to, for example, in the prior case when we had the Zendesk ticket, we asked, do you want to create a ticket in JIRA? So there you're making kind of recommendations based on your understanding of your scenario. Now you can automate that process by,
and by that you mean basically that in the recipe you're going to have explicit logic that says post this particular message saying if they want to create the JIRA ticket.
So I mean, it's like every message that you're sending on the channel, you can have a companion action with that message, right? So that suggestion can be hard-coded by you explicitly specifying the buttons there, right? Or you could say that, in a generic manner that, okay, in this message, I have information about, let's say, JIRA.
Or I have a maybe once. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Zendesk ticket comes in, right? Through a notification. You are the sales. You are a sales rep that is like watching all these tickets coming in Northeast region, and then a ticket comes by, and the most natural thing that you'd want to know is like additional details about this customer, right? And those would be, which is probably already exists as a command. Then you have this, and then this is an easy way to tie it together, right?
Tie it together. I mean, the thing is, you could explicitly specify it, or you're simply announcing that, by the way, in the information that I received, I have information about the Salesforce customer also. So I would specify I have information about Salesforce, and the business object is account, and the ID for that is whatever, the 1, 2, 3, 4. So now, if there is any other commands in that you created that works with Salesforce accounts, and that accepts ID as a parameter, then we go and look up and try to match that and suggest that as a possible follow-up command. So it works quite well if you design the business object's name correctly. That's why that 3-part nomenclature of tagging each commands, they are quite useful, because then you end up with interesting graphs, suggestion graphs for individual commands.
Okay, we have 2 questions, 2 more minutes.
Okay.
The one is like when the example where we showed the Zendesk ticket is created, right? For whatever reason, like if the command fails to execute, the ticket couldn't get created, right? You didn't pass the right information. How do you recommend the exception should be handled? That's something the recipe takes care of? That's what you have to build it in? Or like...
I mean, in this particular recipe, I mean, 2 things. I mean, this is one of the issues that we had before when people are, it's still there. If you're using the command line interface, right, you could like miss providing input and so on. Right. And then a lot of times it goes there, and then you have to come back with an error message. But now, Workbot will essentially make sure that you provide the inputs. You have to provide that. So it reduces that window a little bit. But then after that, just for what we are seeing a lot of is there's a giant, error monitor, and the error monitor catches any kind of error and then responds back with details of the error.
Okay.
And I think in the context of a user, I think it works pretty well because they can understand what it is. A little bit different than error happens in an automation scenario with no humans involved.
Okay. Hey, Raj, hopefully that answered your questions. If you have follow-ups, send us an email or contact our customer success team. The last one is from Grant, which is how can we limit which users or private groups have access to Workbot or to particular services? So it's more around security and...
This is at the Slack level. I think when you have a bot, basically it can, it can be, at the Slack level, you have to disable saying that this user should not be wanted to a specific channel or not.
So, and I mean, you could also have a best practice in the sense that Workbot is only available in certain channels. But then it will always be available in a DM unless you do what you just talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Gautam. Thanks, Harish. Folks, thanks for joining. This was a different format we tried. Hopefully, you enjoyed the use cases and the possibilities with Workbot. Send us your feedback if you want to follow up on this, and we can host another webinar around this topic as well. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
That's pretty good.